In this video, I will be making a decision on where to cut out the back of the guitar, how much of this exotic grain to leave in and how much to remove. And to do that, to help me make the decision, it won't make the decision for me, I still have to make the decision myself, I am going to use my Chladni pattern jig, my vibrational mode analysis machine. I'm sure there's an acronym there somewhere. Maybe I'll come up with an acronym. And to do that, rather than using glitter, which was an utter failure, I am going to be using poppy seeds. Thanks for the tips, guys. YouTube came to the rescue. Poppy seeds is the way to go, I reckon. So let's do that, and then let's come back and discuss what we're going to do with the top, and then cut the shape out and finalise it. Make a decision. That's 80 hertz. That's 123 hertz, and I think I skipped a mode, but let's keep going. 138 hertz. Let's just notch it up a little bit. That's 146 hertz. And that's 159 hertz. I'm going to label this side A and flip it and see whether this pattern moves over here, because I'm interested to know whether this is purely a property of the board or whether it's some property of how I'm exciting the plate. So I'm going to put an A on that. Side B. Right, what did that tell us? Oh boy. We know that the bass frequency of this top is 80 hertz. And we also saw that there is no real weird stuff going on here in vibrational terms. So I guess the only thing we can take away from that affects this build is I don't think this area is necessarily junk. But there is weird stuff going on here, which I'll explain. That 80 hertz figure isn't something that really affects this build as such, but it is baseline information we can use in future builds. We know that this plate of this size in free plate mode, i.e. not supported around the edge, vibrates at its fundamental frequency of 80 hertz. If this was thicker, that frequency would be higher, and likewise lower if it was thinner. So that's a figure we can use to compare with other raw pieces of guitar back. If I like the sound of this guitar, if it all seems to be behaving really well, then maybe one way we can use to thickness the next guitar plate would be to take it down until its fundamental frequency at this size is 80 hertz. I'm not saying that's how I'll do it, but it is a piece of information that we can use. It's always a good idea to keep your information from each guitar, and then you can make comparisons as you go along. So that's the frequency, and usually with these analyses the frequencies that you get out of them are the most important pieces of information, because that's what you're doing, that's how you're tuning the guitar top. But this is a free plate, it's not supported around the edge, it's not guitar shaped, and as such 80 hertz doesn't really mean anything other than being able to compare this to another similar plate. I hope that makes sense, doesn't it? The other thing we could get from that analysis is looking at the patterns that we're seeing. And again, the patterns don't really affect how we build the guitar, but what they tell us is what type of vibration we're seeing. We usually talk about monopoles and dipoles. Some luthiers will even talk about tripoles. Let me explain what these are. The most fundamental mode of vibration is the monopole, and that's like a drum skin. The whole top is going up and down, and that's usually the lowest note, and nearly always the lowest note. And you can get a monopole on a free plate, you can get a monopole on a guitar-shaped piece of wood, and that's the fundamental frequency usually, and that tells us a lot of information when we're building it. On a large free plate, not so much, but when this is guitar shaped and supported at the edges, the monopole mode tells us a lot about the bass response of that particular guitar. So that's useful information. The Chladni patterns we see help to tell us what sort of mode of vibration we're seeing. So if we had a big void in the middle with all the stuff accumulating around the edge, we'd know that that is a monopole. And we didn't really see much of that on this particular analysis. And I think the reason for that is, as I mentioned in the previous video, there's a line of stiffness, if you like, in a Y shape along this. And that Y-shaped stiffness, where the grain does funny things down here, I think is inhibiting the monopole, it's distorting it. I was seeing vibration sort of across this way, and I think it's this stiffness down here that's affecting that. So you might on this have two monopoles, and I think I was seeing that in that some of the modes of vibration seem to be very close to each other, only a few hertz apart. And I think some of that is a monopole in that direction and a monopole in that direction. I'm not 100% sure about this. But that's the monopole, and it's useful information which will become more useful later on. The next mode you will usually see is a dipole. And we go from mono, 1, dipole, 2. The dipole is where the front is doing this, and you'll usually see a node line roughly down the middle, but of course the guitar is a funny shape, mine's asymmetric, it's not necessarily going to be straight down the middle, but it's a mode of vibration where it's sort of seesawing like this. And if it's doing exactly that, where you're seeing two lobes with a node down the middle, and we did see that mode in that analysis, that's called a cross dipole because it's vibrating across the guitar. There is a long dipole where it's doing this. Now, I didn't see much of that happening, but then I would probably have to go to higher frequencies. It wasn't an exhaustive analysis. I could have kept going and seen more modes, but I didn't do that. But I need to read up more on this, but I think very roughly speaking, don't quote me on this, the monopole is largely to do with the bass response of the guitar. The dipole more about the mid-range, and the long dipole more about the treble response, and I think the projection. Sometimes the cross dipole and long dipole are swapped over, and it's very different between an X-braced steel-strung guitar and a fan-braced classical guitar, in that the X-brace on a steel-string guitar kind of inhibits the higher modes, and it encourages the monopole, because the X-brace really, the top wants to vibrate as a single unit really, whereas on a fan-braced classical guitar, it's more easily vibrating in a cross dipole mode, because you haven't got this longitudinal stiffening. If that makes sense. I have to read up on this a lot more. Once I'm happy about all this, I'll do a proper video explaining all of this. I need to get up to speed on this soon, because I will be moving on to the top soon, and indeed I've got to do the back as well. But that all comes later, when we're actually tap tuning the top and of course the back. Knowing what the frequencies of the different modes of vibration are is of great help, because it's those frequencies that change when we shape the braces, and how we shape the braces can affect those modes. Right. Now, I did free plate vibration just then. Ideally, as this is a guitar top, we would support the edges, and I have a jig to do that. So the next thing I have to do on this is decide exactly where to have the back, because we can have it right the way up here, with a minimum of wood down there, and actually that looks quite nice, or we can have it all the way down there and have all of this exotic wood, and that looks quite nice as well. So the next stage is deciding what to do. Ooh. This is the side I've labelled B, and this is the side that I've labelled A, And looking at the two, I've decided that this is the better book match, and so this is the outside of the guitar. So the guitar back will go like that. So that's the first decision made, but now the next decision is whether to have a back that looks more like that, and I don't think so, or whether to have a guitar back that's more like that, which looks promising, but I think we can compromise a little and go for something that looks like that. Place your bets now. Actually, that, oh yeah, oh, decisions. How much of the exotic grain to leave in, because doing it like that, we've got more of this grain line coming down here. All of this is braced effectively, so, but then we've got the white coming right into the middle of the back, so is that going to inhibit the vibration at all? Would it be better to have less of the grain? Decisions. I've made a mark there. At this point we have grain lines coming down and nicely coming around and echoing the edge of the guitar, so it creates a nice aesthetic. If we move up, then the grain lines are coming down and they're just ending at the end of the guitar, they're not scooping round, so it doesn't look quite as good. But any further, and it doesn't really affect the look really, it's just adding more of this potentially badly behaved grain. So I think by putting the end there is a slight compromise, but I think a good one. And then we'll have to worry about how this triangle is behaving later. There will of course be a brace across there. Everything might be fine. I don't think there's any way really of saying for sure at the moment how this is going to sound. This is the proper template. The one you just saw is actually only the support for the Chladni jig. It is a little bit smaller. I think overall it's 9mm shorter end to end and a few millimeters shorter side to side. So this is the proper template, and we have now positioned it according to the mark we just made. This is a blue art pencil, it just makes it easier to see that when we're cutting it out. Well, that's a milestone. Was it at all obvious how nervous I was making that cut? That bandsaw is such a brilliant bandsaw, and the blade is very sharp, and there is no resistance to movement at all. It will slice through a piece of wood like this in a second. You could go the full length almost instantly. Well, I exaggerate, but the slightest twitch and you'll go inside the line. There's just no resistance. So I was having to keep 2 points of contact and worrying about how close my hands were getting to the blade, but making sure that I keep the resistance and don't let go with the one hand, so the whole thing pivots and goes into the blade. And I did think about using the scroll saw, but that would have taken a lot longer. And the scroll saw is not without its dangers. Because of the up and down motion, it can sometimes grab the piece, and I have broken delicate pieces of work on a scroll saw before now. Not that this is that delicate, but it's not risk-free, the scroll saw. But we're there. Right, I'm going to put this back on the Chladni jig as a free plate, just to see how the fundamental frequency has changed. That's only a piece of information for later use. You know, what is the fundamental frequency of the top? And I might strap it in. I will strap it into the jig to constrain the sides, and then see what that does to the frequency. But I'm not going to go through a full analysis with all the modes. For now, I may do that at a later date, maybe with the front. I really want to get on and brace this, which will be in the next video. Yeah, so let's go back to the Chladni jig. Okay, that appears to be some form of dipole motion, because we've got two areas here and another area over here. And that is lower than I found before. I probably didn't go low enough before. That's 54 Hertz, which is really quite low. I suspect I've got this a bit thin, but that's probably not a problem. But that's interesting. I didn't expect to have such a low frequency. But let's just have a look at another couple of modes. That's 70 Hertz, and there's something going on around here. So that is a vibrational mode, but only on the ends here. So perhaps that is a sign that the grain here is sort of affecting the way it works. Let's keep going. There's another mode. We've got some vibration here. That's 76 Hertz. 90 Hertz. Sorry, 91. And that's 103 Hertz. And for the first time, we're seeing more of a dipole motion, because the whole of this area is vibrating. But again, you can see how the grain lines down here are really affecting how this part of the guitar vibrates. We've got free movement up here, not so much down here. This is quite a complex piece of wood, I think. I'm going to leave it there for the free plate modes. Let's just strap it into the other jig and see what happens. You can now see why I've got this sheet over the top of this. Catches all the poppy seeds. For now, I'm just going to tack it down with masking tape. In future, I'm going to use clamps. Kind of destroyed the pattern a little bit, but at 80 Hertz I had a very clear dipole going on. At a much lower frequency there was a hint of just some activity over here. I might do that all again actually. Let me just sort of reset that and try and see what happens again. But I think you can see how different the vibration is when we've got it constrained. That's 62 Hertz with just that single area there. 71 Hertz, it's interesting how it seems to be a very wide frequency range and the area is just getting bigger and bigger. .75 Hertz, and this area comes into play. Previously described that as a dipole, but actually I think this is our monopole, because this area here is still vibrating. There's a lot of activity here. This is not a node. This whole area seems to be going up and down. This isn't two separate lobes coming in and out. I think the whole thing is vibrating in unison. Let's just leave that running a little bit. Glad I kept that running. That's 88.6 Hertz, and that I would say is our true monopole. That's our classic drum skin. There's hardly any activity up here, although there is a slight vibration in this area. But that's our circular. That is our monopole, our true monopole. That's 88.6 Hertz. Quite what was going on leading up to that, I'm not sure, but that's our drum skin. Fun this, isn't it? I've got to be careful not to blow the poppy seeds all over the place. Perhaps I'll talk back here. And if I laugh, I mustn't laugh. But it is rather fun, this. 88.6 Hertz is our monopole. I've established that. I think some of the lower frequencies I was getting were probably being triggered from the harmonics of the signal. I think this is distorting quite a lot. This isn't a pure sine wave that's going into this. So there's going to be a lot of harmonics in the signal. So it limits the accuracy with which you can get. If I was exciting this with a pure sine wave, maybe 44 Hertz does excite this, but I think it's a bit suspicious that it's half this frequency. So I suspect this is the fundamental frequency, this monopole that we're seeing here. I don't know. If any of you have an experience of doing this, then let me know. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. This information is not useful for this build as such, because this is unbraced, but knowing that this displays a monopole at 89 Hertz, let's call it, is useful information for later builds, because I can compare it to other backs that I might build, which may have higher or lower frequencies, and if this guitar seems to work well, then if it's a higher frequency, we could perhaps thin the back out to lower it before we put braces on. I don't know whether that's the sort of thing I will do, but it's information that's I think useful to store away for future use. Yeah, but above all, this is fun. Yeah, see, every time I laugh, I blow all the poppy seeds all over the place. This is fun. That's it for this video. In the next video I will get the thing braced, but for now I'll see you in the next video. Like, share, subscribe, comment, do all the usual things, and we'll see you later. Bye.